There's a Japanese philosophy hiding in plain sight that most people think they understand, but almost no one actually does. It's called Kaizen. You've heard the word before. You've probably seen it used in corporate meetings, productivity blogs, or motivational posts online. Continuous improvement, small changes, incremental progress. That's the version everyone knows. And that version is incomplete, sanitized, safe, because the real Kaizen contains a principle so powerful that if people truly understood it, the entire self-help industry would collapse overnight. At the center of real Kaizen is something called the 1% rule. It sounds almost stupid when you first hear it. So small that your brain immediately dismisses it. So insignificant that it feels pointless. And that's exactly why it works. The 1% rule doesn't rely on motivation. It doesn't demand discipline. It doesn't require willpower or dramatic personality change. It bypasses all of that. And when applied correctly, it silently destroys procrastination at its root. The reason this rule is rarely taught properly is simple. There's no money in it. If people actually applied the 1% rule, they wouldn't need expensive courses, hype-filled seminars, or dramatic life transformation programs. They wouldn't need motivation at all. They'd just take microscopic action every single day and let time do the rest. To understand how this works in real life, you need to understand Hiroshi. Hiroshi was 31 years old, intelligent, capable, and completely stuck. Not lazy. Lazy people do nothing. Hiroshi was always busy. He was constantly planning, researching, organizing, and preparing. His calendar was full. His mind was full. His life, however, was empty of results. Hiroshi was a professional delayer. For 3 years, Hiroshi had been about to start writing a book. He had the idea. He had the outline. He had pages of research notes saved on his laptop. He told friends he was writing a book. He even created writing schedules multiple times. Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., 500 words a day. The plan was perfect. He never followed it, not once. For 4 years, Hiroshi had been about to start a business. He had a solid idea for a software product that solved a real problem. He validated the market. He mapped out features. He bought a domain name, but the product didn't exist. Not a prototype, not a single line of code. Every weekend was supposed to be the weekend. Every weekend ended with the same excuse. More research, more planning, better conditions later. The conditions were never perfect. The business never started. Hiroshi had also been about to get in shape for most of his adult life. He joined gyms, quit them, joined again, quit again. He bought workout programs, meal plans, fitness trackers. None of them worked, not because they were bad, but because they required consistency he couldn't maintain. He always started aggressively, 2-hour workouts on day 1, extreme soreness on day 2, skipped sessions by day 3, complete abandonment by week 2. The cycle repeated endlessly. His career followed the same pattern, 6 years in the same role, not because he lacked talent, but because he delayed everything until the last possible moment. Projects that should have taken 2 weeks were delayed for a month, then rushed in 2 days of panic. His manager finally said it directly. Hiroshi, you have potential, but potential means nothing without execution. You delay everything. Either fix this, or we'll replace you. Hiroshi agreed. He knew the truth, and yet nothing changed. He even delayed fixing his delay problem. One night, Hiroshi sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by physical evidence of his procrastination. A guitar he bought 2 years ago to finally learn music, untouched. Language learning apps opened once and abandoned. Half-read books on discipline and productivity. A journal filled with goals he never pursued. Workout equipment collecting dust. His life felt like a museum of intentions, things he meant to do, planned to do, and delayed forever. Hiroshi wasn't incapable. He was stuck, and he had no idea how to escape. At work, a quiet coworker named Takeshi had recently been promoted to senior developer after only 2 years. Hiroshi had been there 6. During lunch one day, Hiroshi finally asked, "How did you move up so fast? What's your secret?" Takeshi smiled. "No secret, I just use Kaizen." Hiroshi laughed. "Kaizen? That's just continuous improvement, right?" Takeshi shook his head. "That's the corporate version. Real Kaizen is about the 1% rule." Takeshi explained how, after World War II, Japan had to rebuild from nothing. Massive changes weren't possible, so instead, they focused on tiny improvements, just 1% at a time. Improvements so small, they didn't trigger resistance. So small, they didn't require motivation. But when repeated daily, those tiny improvements compounded into massive transformation. Then Takeshi said the part no one teaches. The 1% rule isn't about improvement, it's about action. You reduce the action so much that excuses disappear. You can't delay something that takes 30 seconds. This contradicted everything Hiroshi believed. Every productivity system told him to aim big, plan aggressively, commit deeply. Kaizen said the opposite: make the goal embarrassingly small. Make the time requirement laughably easy. Make the action so simple that avoiding it feels harder than doing it. When Hiroshi mentioned his book, Takeshi didn't hesitate. Stop aiming for 500 words. Write one sentence. That's it. One sentence per day. Hiroshi objected immediately. One sentence felt pointless. Takeshi smiled. You're already writing 0 sentences per day. One is infinitely better than 0. Skeptical but desperate, Hiroshi decided to test the 1% rule. He defined the smallest possible actions he couldn't avoid. Writing, 1 sentence per day. Business, 1 line of code. Fitness, 1 push-up. Not impressive, not heroic, just unavoidable. On day 1, he wrote 1 sentence. 15 seconds, 1 line of code. 10 seconds, 1 push-up. 5 seconds, 30 seconds total. 3 years of delay broken in half a minute. Day 2, day 3, day 4. By day 7, something strange happened. After writing 1 sentence, he kept going. Not because he had to, but because momentum took over. The requirement stayed tiny, the results quietly grew. And for the first time in his life, Hiroshi didn't feel like a delayer anymore. Hiroshi didn't fully realize it at first, but what he had changed wasn't his schedule, his environment, or his motivation. He had changed the size of the demand he was placing on himself, and that single adjustment altered everything. By the second week, the streak had become more important than the outcome. Hiroshi wasn't thinking about finishing a book or launching a startup anymore. His only goal was simpler: don't break the chain. 1 sentence, 1 line, 1 push-up. Missing even 1 day suddenly felt absurd. Breaking a streak for the sake of not writing 10 words made no psychological sense. The cost of skipping became higher than the cost of acting. Some days, Hiroshi did the bare minimum and stopped. On days when he was exhausted, stressed, or overwhelmed, he wrote exactly 1 sentence, typed 1 line, dropped down for 1 push-up, and that was it. And instead of guilt, he felt relief. He had kept his promise. Other days, something different happened. After the first sentence, his mind stayed open. 1 sentence became a paragraph. 1 line of code became a function. 1 push-up became 10, then 20. But the key was this: none of that extra work was required. It happened naturally, without pressure. This was the hidden power of the 1% rule. Expansion was allowed, but never demanded. The requirement stayed microscopic. And because the requirement stayed small, resistance never returned. After 30 days, Hiroshi reviewed his progress. The numbers shocked him. He had written over 12,000 words, more than he had written in the previous 3 years combined. His software project, once just a folder of ideas, now had real structure, working features, and forward momentum. His body felt stronger. He had done far more than 30 push-ups that month. But even more importantly, he had exercised every single day, yet the biggest change wasn't visible on paper or in metrics. It was internal. Hiroshi no longer saw himself as someone who meant to do things. He was someone who showed up daily. The identity of a delayer was cracking. By day 60, the compound effect became impossible to ignore. Hiroshi had written nearly 30,000 words. His book had shape, direction, and substance. His app had become a functioning prototype. His fitness routine had grown naturally into full workouts. Not because he forced it, but because the habit was already locked in. The hardest part, starting, was gone forever. That's when Hiroshi understood the deepest truth behind Kaizen. The action changes the identity, not the result. Every day, he completed the minimum. He proved something to himself. I am the kind of person who keeps commitments. Writers write, builders build. People who train. Once that identity forms, behavior stops requiring effort. It becomes automatic. By 90 days, the transformation was undeniable. Half the book was finished. The app was in beta testing. He had lost weight, gained strength, and, most importantly, gained trust in himself, something he hadn't felt in years. Hiroshi began studying Kaizen more deeply, and finally understood why the true 1% rule is rarely taught in the West. It's not dramatic, it's not sexy, it doesn't sell urgency or excitement. You can't build a motivational empire telling people to do one push-up. The self-help industry survives on intensity, not consistency, on big promises, not small actions. But the brain doesn't respond well to big promises. Neuroscience shows that when an action feels too large, the amygdala activates, triggering stress and resistance. Cortisol rises, avoidance begins. But actions below a certain threshold, around 1% of baseline behavior, don't trigger that response. They slide past resistance unnoticed. That's why the 1% rule works. It doesn't fight the brain, it outsmarts it. 6 months later, Hiroshi's life looked unrecognizable. The book was nearly complete. The business had launched with paying users. His health was the best it had ever been. None of this came from motivation, discipline, or willpower. It came from showing up every day for less than a minute. Hiroshi realized procrastination was never a character flaw. It was simply resistance to actions that felt too big. Reduce the action, and resistance disappears. Delay isn't defeated by force. It's defeated by shrinking the task until avoidance no longer makes sense. That's the forbidden truth of Kaizen. If you've been delaying something for months or years, you don't need a new plan. You don't need inspiration. You don't need to get serious. You need to choose one absurdly small action and do it every day. One sentence, one push-up, 1 minute. That's it. Most people won't do this because it feels too small to matter. And that's exactly why they stay stuck. The people who understand the 1% rule don't look impressive on day 1. But give them 90 days, and they become unstoppable. Start today, not tomorrow, not next week. Right now, do your 1%. And remember, consistency beats intensity every time.